Today we are going to look at 3 different materials from 3 different Mahler symphonies and investigate their diverse representation. I tend to do longer, coherent deep dives and will continue to do so, but this video, however, will quite disconnectedly pinpoint some sections that I always find particularly moving and discuss how Mahler reimagines material to arrive at quite disparate sounding surface structures. The selected music is from Symphonies 2, 5 and 9, and we will investigate them in that order, due to the gradual increase in complexity. As always, the more you know about each work coming into this analysis, the more you will get out of it. Let's start by listening to the first of 3 representations of what is, in my opinion, the most quintessential material from Mahler's Second Symphony, after which we will follow it through its variations to its natural conclusion. This first representation exists in G-flat major, with a quick unprepared detour to the key of E and its parallel minor, all appearing at the end of the first hymn in the finale. The second time we hear this music, it is accompanied by the full string section in the lower register, shadowing the choir, giving body without attracting attention. More importantly, a beautiful foreboding solo trumpet joins the choir with a counter melody, which coincides with the introduction of one of the most fateful inner voice movements in the late Romantic repertoire, which appears in the sopranos and altos during a prolonged C pedal, implying many different non-functional tonalities until the last moment when it gets reinterpreted as an altered secondary dominant A-flat in first inversion, leading us to the expected dominant of G-flat major, which is D-flat. The third and last time this material gets stated is of course at the apex of the biggest climax ever written. Here the chromatic line we just observed is preceded by a set of modulations, which finally arrive at the dominant of E-flat, which is B-flat. After a diminished sequence which attempts to tonicize the subdominant A-flat major, the cascading chromatic line ensues. Here the resulting surface structure is polytonal. In the basses we have a clear A-flat chord with the fundamental A-flat supported by the double basses. Above this, however, the falling chromatic triads, which now are heavily enforced by both trumpets and trombones, imply G minor, followed by F major, and finally a misspelled E augmented chord, acting as a dominant to A. In the following bar we do get an A chord, but it's an A half diminished, which gets reinterpreted as an altered F chord in the first inversion, acting as the dominant of 5 before the last perfect cadence in E flat. An interesting thing to note is that Mahler hides an E-flat tonic pedal in the middle voices starting from the A half diminished chord, first acting as a flat 5 in the A chord, then the 7th of the F chord, and finally as a suspended 4th during the B flat dominant. Next up is the material from Mahler's Fifth, and to acquaint ourselves more deeply with a material you definitely have heard before, we will start by looking at its first appearance found in Mahler's most famous movement. This is at the end of the development section of the Adagio, and before listening I will point out a few things. First, listen to how Mahler refrains from resolving the appoggiatura figure that opens the movement, which here instead lingers, forcing subsequent developments. Secondly, how Mahler plays with the same principle we found in Wagner's transformation music, displacing stepwise motion by an octave, resulting in elusive minor seventh intervals. I have highlighted them all in yellow just because they are all so unmistakable once you have heard them. In fact, let's compare the descending seventh motif found in the Tristan Prelude with Mahler's treatment. Although the harmony is mostly diatonically functional, there are two modulations I'd like to clarify. First, the modulation from G flat to E. Mahler solves this issue here by superimposing two modulatory principles over one another. First, common tone modulation. The dominant 7 chord of the starting key, G flat, is of course D flat 7. Both the 5th and the 7th scale degree of this dominant chord, which are A flat and C flat, can be found in our target key, E major, as the enharmonic equivalents G sharp and B. So both these notes can just bleed over, being reinterpreted as the 3rd and 5th of the following E tonic chord, thereby ignoring their dominant function. This is called common tone modulation. The second modulatory principle is tritone substitution. As you can see, the chord leading up to the E tonic is a C7 chord. However, C7 does not exist as a function in either G flat or E major. So how does Mahler justify this chord? Well, as you can see, the following tonic has a 5th in the bass. The 5th of E is B, and C then acts as a tritone substitution of its dominant, F sharp. This way we have both modulatory principle occurring simultaneously, one of enharmonic interpretation of G flat 7 into E major, and one of tritone substitution, making C7 function as a dominant of 5 in E. The second modulation, however, is strange to say the least, and it's totally saved only by chromatic relation. In this instant we have a B dominant arpeggio in the violins superimposed over an A sharp 7 chord in the violas and cellos. Of course, the following root note is A, so you could argue that the tritone relationship we observed previously persists here, but the B dominant chord remains over the bar line, making the following A act as the 7th of that chord. So I would say that these two harmonic situations are only related through chromaticism and otherwise non-functional. But enough talk, let's listen. The first time this material reappears in the following movement, it does so as a form of dance music. It's faster, lighter, nimble, and youthful in a way that only Mahler ever is. Instantly, we are plucked into motion by pizzicato rhythms played by the lower strings, with the viola occupying the beats where the cellos and double basses rest. This combination creates a sort of 4/4 waltz. It's definitely not a waltz, but could easily be mistaken as such because of this particular syncopation. The melody is subject to certain variations, mostly transposition by the octave, on certain notes to keep the music at a more mellow register, but the real beauty is now to be found in the counter melodies and the shorter fragments found in the middle and lower voices. I will actually only highlight these during our listen to help us draw the ear to these nimble and lush inner voice movements, since the main melody is mostly unaltered. Please note the choice of adding bassoons approaching the climax to this otherwise string-only section of music. Only about 10 pages later, we get the second statement of this now dance music. And it's probably my favorite in all of Mahler's Fifth. First off, here Mahler take the opposite approach with the melody. Instead of transposing certain notes down by an octave to reach a more subdued contour like in our previous example, here he extends the octave transpositions upwards, momentarily hurling this beautiful development from our beloved Adagio up towards the stratosphere, giving the melody a glistening quality one can only find in the extreme register of the violin. And even though this is in itself beautiful, its beauty is nothing compared to what we find in the counter melodies. Starting this section, there is an interplay between the upper woods and the lower strings, which then transfers to an interplay between the first horn and the second violins, to end with a continual call and response imitation of the main melody in the cellos and violas. It's an absolute electric reimagination of the material we first heard in the fourth movement, and aware of this, Mahler of course extends the final cadential passage, allowing for the violins to go on a long sneaky journey down to the low register to finish the passage. Again, I will highlight only the secondary voices when relevant to help us hear all the gorgeous details of this surface structure. That's some lovely music. Now there is one final statement of this material at the end of this movement, but I will let us study that on our own, since it pertains a lot of material unique to the final movement, interceding the dance music, which we do not have time to cover in this video. Let's instead move to our final materials from Mahler's Ninth, and I'll warn you that this is about to get intricate for the ear. This far into Mahler's life as a composer, he is really pushing the boundaries of both form and development. For this reason, the first 3 minutes of the first movement of Mahler's Ninth acts as a form of false exposition Traditionally, composers introduce music in the beginning of a work to later expand upon those ideas, but in Mahler's ninth, that gets flipped on its head, or at least muddied, to say the least. In the first 3 minutes, material that will eventually be revealed gets tossed together, interrupted. It's almost as if parts of the score have been ripped out. Sometimes only outlines of later material exists, and structures are not yet presented in their full nature. So bear with me here. We are going to first hear the material in its incomplete form, where it's continually interrupted, which is its first appearance. Let's introduce the materials we are interested in, and if you at any point feel lost, that's totally fine. It will become clearer, or at least somewhat clearer, during the final reveal. First, but not the least, there is this green motif that we will call A. It appears all the time in multiple voices during this particular music, and it does so at all types of speeds, meaning that it can appear in 16 notes, 8 notes, triplets, or even quarter notes, which makes it somewhat difficult to localize at a first hearing, but easy once you're aware of these adaptations. Secondly, there is the B motif, which is the main motif of the movement, a simple descending second motif. Next up is the C motif, which is this restless 8th note motif that often appears in transposing sequences like such. And lastly, there is what we will call D, which is just a variation of C, but it has such a personal quality that I think it deserves its own categorization. Just like C, it often occurs in sequential transposition. When hearing this first introductory music, the entire point is that you should only sense the material, so if you feel as though parts are difficult to pick out, that's totally fine. I just really wanted to present the material the way Mahler intended it. It does make the later reveal so much more rewarding. So here we go. Okay, so I think we better hear the complete statement while we still have the material fresh in our ears. Remember that what we are about to hear sits 10 minutes apart from what we just heard, which clearly reveals that this first music was a form of future remembrance, if you will, or a prospective reminiscence. I will once again play all motifs separately, as I think it will help us decipher what we're actually going to hear. I think this is as prepared as we will get for this moment. Let's hear the magic, and again, thank you for listening, truly.